by Carol Lombardi. We have Ms. Piscali in the high school AP history class. Our VP of the board, Gabby Bennett-Meany. Trustee Tracy Williams. Trustee Mike Dera. And high school principal Caleb Rhodes. From the library, we have Director Francis Picardi and President Renato Peralta. Also, we have American Legion Commander Joe Kolianki. From our Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill's office, her Chief of Staff, Jill Hirsch. My new best friend, Nora Bishop, who helped put this all together, so thank you, Nora. Yeah, everyone gets a round of applause now. Go ahead. I'd like to call to the podium Mayor Michael Melham.
Thank you, Vinny. One more round of applause for Vinny Casarelli. I usually start off by welcoming everybody. I usually say, welcome to Belleville. It's an honor to have such distinguished guests. But about an hour ago in my office, I had the opportunity to sit and speak with Mr. Bunch and his family. I didn't welcome to Belleville, I welcomed them home. So thank you once again, sir, for bringing your family here. As we talked in my office, we discussed that Belleville is not the same Belleville as it was in the 50s, the 60s. Nor in the 70s when you left. Belleville, I always say, is a township in transition. It's a township that historically has been a very welcoming place. It's unfortunate that Mr. Bunch's time in Belleville, portions of it, weren't so welcoming to him, but I think it's part that made his character, and it's something that I know we've learned a lot about, as we've learned a lot about him and his family. So once again, sir, I thank you and your lovely family for being here today. When we had our first ever Black History Month event a couple years ago, we had reached out to Mr. Bunch, and I had the opportunity to speak to him on the phone. And while your schedule didn't permit at that time, I remember the day I was standing in our library and we were setting up for the event. And I got a phone call on my cell phone from a 202 area code. And we were just talking about area codes actually just now. I get a phone call from a 202 area code and I identified that as Washington, D.C. So I answered it, thought maybe it was one of our representatives calling or something, and Mr. Bunch had the opportunity, gave me the pleasure and the honor of taking some time out of his schedule to speak with me on that day, to encourage us as a township and to encourage me as a mayor. And it was at that time, although I had only read a couple portions of his bio at the time, or I've studied him a little bit on Wikipedia, hearing it firsthand from him was something special. I have to say, that was probably something that I'll remember most of my first term as mayor, that conversation that we had at the time. And again, I thank you for taking your time to do that. It really meant a lot to me, and it meant a lot, I think, to this township as well. We're going to hear a little bit about Mr. Bunch's history, his time here in Belleville. We're going to hear a little bit about all his acclamations and everything he's accomplished in his life. But most of you probably don't know some of the deeper portions of his bio, ones that pertain specifically to Belleville. I believe Councilman Gravel will get into some of his great accomplishments that we're very proud of. But I just want to read some quotes from an article that was run a couple years ago from a Belleville journalist at the time. This is Mr. Bunch speaking. "We were the only black family in the neighborhood at the time," Bunch recalled. "And those were different times for sure. He was as fascinated about our population, our Italian heritage, and he wanted to know more about them as much as he wanted to know more about his own family." He went on to say that Belleville was a diverse community. Belleville was not such a diverse community back in the 1960s. But he would soon learn growing up that the mostly white community would teach him a level of mental fortitude which had carried his professional life. He found himself fascinated by our culture. He says that, "I remember walking up and down Greylock Parkway," which we sit on today. He remembers vividly when he was an athlete, and today we had the opportunity to drive him past number 8 school where he played, and I know that story is a story that you mentioned in your book. He mentions as a 15-year-old kid, there weren't many African-American children like him. He remembers a time when a police officer pulled his car up and asked him what he was doing here. He remembers being up against that car and speaking to that police officer. And I had the opportunity to share with you today, sir, that our police department is a very diverse population of our township employees today. So I again assure you that Belleville's a little different today. We're always a township that's growing, we're a township that's evolving, and we accept the errors of our ways, and we love our history, and we certainly love our tradition. And I will go on to say, as I conclude, that albeit I know that his time here, for a certain period of time, was a deep cut. And I'm sorry that your family had experienced that. I truly am. But please know, it was just a small window in Belleville's history, a township that has historically been very welcoming. So today, sir, we honor you today for not only what you have become, but for what you have overcome. Today is your day, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Speaking of history buffs, our next speaker is not only the Vice President of the Essex County Commissioner Board, but he actually also is a history professor. So I'd like to call him up here now, Carlos Palmares.
Thank you, and like your class, I let my class out early today in Western Civ 2. So, I said I had to go to a historical event today. It's probably not what they were thinking, but we're talking 300, 400, 500 years ago in my class. But it is an honor, and on behalf of the Essex County Board of Commissioners, formerly freeholders, I will welcome you back home. As the mayor said, it's an honor to have you here. But for me, it's a thrill because I'm actually a museum guy. I'm a history guy, and I've been down to Washington, D.C. at every museum possible since my sister works down there in DEA. And since I was in college, I would take no less than 24 of my friends at the same time. So that would have been one heck of a party. Down there to really appreciate our history. And I find myself as a dad of 3 today, trekking them all across the country, stopping at everything, every little historic site, the Civil War Trail, which has gone from Maryland, that's where she lives. And it's a real treat. And the reason why I mention that is that one of the things that often gets ignored is local history. And I think that's one of the champions, that all of us who teach history, work in museums and culture, this is what our job is, to make it relevant in the world. So it may have been different 50 years ago, but we need to teach that history. So it's a real honor for all of us to be here today. I'm sure you're proud. I'm sure your network of supporters are very proud, because I'm sure that for you to be here today, it took a wide network of people to support you and love you throughout your entire career. And by extension, we're now part of that network, and we're very honored to have that here today. And I also want to commend Mayor and Council for this too, because in the last decade or so, local history has been very important here. And it's very important to tell the story and not ignore it. So I want to commend them as well for acknowledging the importance and significance, not only of your personal accomplishments, but of history here in Belleville. So thank you very much, and on behalf of Essex County, we're very proud of you, and you make us, make sure you let the world know we're very proud of you over here. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a close personal friend of Lonnie I'd like to introduce Councilman Stephen Ravel. I did my own research too. But Vinny says I gotta read some of this up.
You never did follow the record.
Why should I? But I did listen to my wife, which I'm sure you did too. Yeah, I actually had to edit some stuff out because we're talking a little bit about the Italians and the Irish and how that was mainly our community at that point in time, right? So Lonnie Bunch was born in Newark in 1952, grew up in Belleville. He graduated from Belleville High School in 1970, then went on to Howard, and I guess married you, Maria? I'm trying to remember. A little later than that? Okay. That happens. Some of us grow over time, right? So he earned his BA and MA in American History and African Studies. Now I'm going to switch to my story. Before I forget this, Vinny, I want to acknowledge you and Anthony and everybody on the council for letting us do this, because this is really a group effort and we need to work together. Growing up in Belleville in the late 50s and early 60s, mark those numbers, was a great experience. On a weekly basis, we would visit our grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins in town. My Uncle Fred and Aunt Mill Tripp, with my cousins Fred and Nancy, lived on Linden Avenue. Their backyard and Lonnie's backyard shared a common fence. That was where I was first introduced to Lonnie Bunch. However, I lived on the other side of town, so I didn't get to see him as much as Fred did. And thankfully, Fred actually came down from Maine to see me. They went to school number 5, whereas my brother Damon and I went to 8. We all met up again at Belleville High School. Lonnie, like my brother, were upperclassmen, class of 7. And I know he's a proud member of the class of 7. Well, whereas I was part of the class of 72. I got to see Lonnie occasionally, but of course I was an underclassman. He was always nice to me, a true gentleman, and remains such today. As the years went by, life took us all in different directions. Fred and Lonnie traveled the world, while I spent most of my time in Belleville or in the woods of Sussex County. After seeing Dr. Lonnie Bunch III on the History Channel special, I started to realize how important Lonnie had become to our country's narrative. It was kind of a shock to me to look up and say, wait a minute, I know that guy.
Shock to me too.
Yeah, well, hey, God bless him. When the Belleville Education Foundation created the Belleville Wall of Fame, Ann Schneider, along with my wife Susan, myself, and many others, lobbied to nominate Lonnie. If you visit Belleville High School today, you will see his picture on the Wall of Fame outside the auditorium. In retrospect, Lonnie was just getting warmed up. I have a saying over my desk that basically says, vision without planning and execution is dreaming. Well, Lonnie had a vision, a plan, and he executed in extraordinary fashion. In 2005, he started with the vision of the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. When he started as director, he had 1 staff member, no collections, no funding, and no site for that museum. An extremely challenging beginning. However, the results were amazing. Since its opening in September of 2016, the museum has welcomed more than 8 million visitors. It has a collection of over 40,000 objects housed in the first green building on the National Mall. To further exemplify what a massive feat this museum project was, in 2019, the creation of the museum became the first Smithsonian effort to be the topic of a Harvard Business Review case study. Give this guy a round of applause. Being a project manager, I kind of understand it. And luckily, I don't have to raise funds, I just got to find them. And working for the federal government, that's even crazier. On June 16, 2019, Lonnie G. Bunch III Dr. Lonnie G. Bunch III, became the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian. As Secretary, he oversees 21 museums, 21 libraries, the National Zoo, numerous research centers, and several educational units and centers. His latest vision includes 2 new museums, the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum and the National Museum of the American Latino, which are currently in development. You can see that Lonnie is committed to lifelong learning. He understands the importance of history and education. Whether it was Santayana or Churchill that said it, if we do not learn from history, we are destined to repeat it. We need to stay focused on increasing our collective cultural IQ and EQ. The only way to eliminate poverty is through education. I believe it is evident. Of course, it's evident that Lonnie's dedicated his entire life to that goal. We are all very proud of your accomplishments and the positive image of Belleville that you represent. I am very proud to introduce the world-renowned, award-winning historian, author, educator, TV personality, father, husband, because being a husband, you know how important having that support of your wife. And I give you a lot of credit for supporting what he did, because I know sometimes my wife doesn't agree with what I do, but she's always there for me. A member of BHS class of 1970 and the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian, Dr. Lonnie Bunch. God bless you.
This is unbelievably humbling, I gotta be honest. The last time I had a police escort, it was going me out of the I love how Belleville has changed. But there is nothing more dangerous than giving a historian a captive audience in life. But in all honesty, I'm so overwhelmed today that I will not be short. I'm honored in a way because I think a lot about this day. I realized that at 17, all I wanted to do was get out of Beech Street. And at 70, all I want to do is come back. There's nothing more powerful than having your hometown relation. I have gotten awards from around the world, but nothing matters as much as this today. So I want to thank you for giving me something that I will always remember. Because I've always viewed myself as a kid from Beech Street and a guy from Belleville. It's all the way I've always defined myself. I want to thank the mayor. I want to thank Councilman Casarelli. I want to thank Steve Ravel. And I also want to thank Donna and Nora. Local people who basically came to a talk I gave in Philadelphia and rekindled my love for Beech Street. So thank you both. Overwhelmed by the support of the class of 70. You guys are pretty cool. And I vowed that I would be brief because you're all getting old. I know you can't see that. But I also want to thank my family. I want to thank my wife, who has really been through a lot. Let's just put it that way. And thank you. Well, there goes my speech. And I want to thank my brother and his wife, Lori. Greg, thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank especially my mother. When she was a newlywed, she came to this street and lived at 125 Beech Street. And in many ways was the glue that held the family together. So, Mom, we love you and thank you so much for all that you've done for us. A lot to me because in some ways you're not just honoring me, you're honoring all the Lonnie Bunches, the other Lonnie Bunches. You're honoring my grandfather, Doc Bunch, who actually bought a house on Beech Street 100 years ago today. Wow. I'm always amazed that this man who began life as a sharecropper, ended life as a dentist living on Beech Street, and recognized his effort transformed a family. And I think you honor my dad, who was one of the best educators I ever knew, who who probably tutored every kid in the neighborhood at some point. And he was somebody who was actually born in this house on Beech Street. And then he also went to number 5. We both had the same kindergarten teacher. Boy, these Belleville teachers stayed around a long time. But I think I love growing up here, and I love growing up on the street for a variety of reasons. But I have to be honest, it wasn't always easy. It wasn't easy being the only black kid in number 5 school until my brother came when I was in 6th grade. This is a street that I remember running down Greylock Parkway, dodging fists and Rachel Epithets. But it's also a street that I remember skipping down with friends, singing dumb songs about Egbert the Easter egg. Just something loving growing up on Belleville. So for me, this was very special. And when I think about the lessons I've learned, I've always felt that I'm very proud to be a Belleville guy, because for me, Belleville taught me how to fight, when to run, and when to talk my way out of things. And that has served me in good stead throughout my career. And in some ways, and also what Belleville gave you was a little bit of an edge. When people told you you couldn't, you were like, yeah, really? And what I love is growing up in this neighborhood. You know, there was a period that I was really good in Sicilian. Now I can only curse in Sicilian. But what's wonderful is that when I'm getting yelled at by members of Congress and I curse at them in Sicilian, they don't know what I'm talking about. Thank you, Bill. But this was also the place where my love of history began. It's where my grandfather read books to me and looked at pictures of people and said, it's a shame these people lived their lives and died, and all it says is unidentified. And I was fascinated by that. How could people not be known? So I've dedicated my life to sort of giving voice to the silent and making visible those who are anonymous. But I also learned so much from the immigrants in this community. I mean, think about it. On the one hand, Belleville wasn't racially diverse, but think about the people who lived on Beech Street. The Scannellis, the Finellis, the Coffees, the Barricades, the Slitzers, the Andersons, the Longos. In some ways, I learned more about diversity and inclusion than any course anybody can take today. Because this was a neighborhood where we had to get together. We learned about each other. We learned each other's culture. We learned the weirdness of some people and the wonderness of others. But basically we said, this is home. And so in some ways, Belleville, Beech Street really taught me and prepared me for the world that we would face. And so for me, thinking about this day, several things come to mind. First, how lucky I was to grow up in a neighborhood that, for all of its challenges, embraced me, gave me an education, inspired me to do more, but also made sure I would never forget. I could tell you a million stories about how the Andersons and the Longos and other families here treated me like I was a member of their family. I could tell stories about how proud I was to play baseball and football for Belleville High School. I must admit, it was pretty dumb being Belleville. You know, if you remember, Steve Band and I both got hurt our senior year. We were going to be stars, and we ended up on the sidelines. I remember we were playing ball once against West Orange, because we could always beat West Orange. And they tackled me in that carry my bag Belleville. I never forgot that. So I'm glad you're Buccaneers. But I guess the other thing is, we can tell stories about, things that weren't pleasant. But the reality is, Belleville made me who I was and who I am. And so all I want to do today is thank you. Thank you for something that I don't believe would really happen. Thank you for helping to honor not me, but the entire Bunch family. In some ways, every person whose name is Bunch is smiling from heaven, is pleased that Belleville, the town that it loved, embraces them. And so I can't thank you enough for this amazing day. The only regret I have is that B&T Subs is closed. But other than that, I can't tell you how pleased I am now. So let me end by simply saying, this is the place that I'm so glad I came to. This is the place that will always be a part of me. And as I tell people in Washington all the time, make me go Belleville. Thank you.
here so we could do the unveiling of the street signs.
I'm sorry. We're both looking forward.